The first light of dawn painted the sacred canyon in amber hues as Chief Running Wolf approached the massive figure at its center. There stood a donkey of extraordinary size, its weathered hide stretched over prominent ribs, secured by chains that seemed unnecessarily heavy for such a weakened creature. Its knowing eyes followed the Apache leader as he dismounted. Around the beast's neck hung a yellowed paper bearing handwriting that made the chief's blood run cold. His grandfather's distinctive script, "A man dead for 20 winters." The message contained only 7 words, yet they threatened everything his tribe had built over generations. What ancient secret could connect this strange beast to the chief's bloodline? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The first light of dawn painted the sacred canyon in amber hues as Chief Running Wolf approached the massive figure at its center. There stood a donkey of extraordinary size, its weathered hide stretched over prominent ribs, secured by chains that seemed unnecessarily heavy for such a weakened creature. Its knowing eyes followed the Apache leader as he dismounted. Around the beast's neck hung a yellowed paper-bearing handwriting that made the chief's blood run cold. His grandfather's distinctive script, "A man dead for 20 winters." The message contained only 7 words, yet they threatened everything his tribe had built over generations. What ancient secret could connect this strange beast to the chief's bloodline? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Running Wolf's weathered hands trembled as he folded the note and tucked it into his shirt pocket, close to his heart. The morning air carried a chill that seemed to settle in his bones these days. 58 winters had etched deep lines across his face, each one a story of triumph or hardship for the Red Mountain Apache tribe. His gaze drifted to the carved bone pipe resting in his saddlebag. The sacred pipe had belonged to 5 generations of tribal leaders before him. Its smooth surface, yellowed with age and smoke, bore intricate carvings of eagles and buffalo that told the story of his people's journey. When decisions weighed heavily, the ritual of smoking the pipe brought clarity and connection to the ancestors who had walked this path before. "Father." The voice pulled him from his thoughts. Nima approached on horseback, her silhouette sharp against the rising sun. At 35, his daughter carried herself with a dignity that made his chest swell with pride. University-educated, but deeply committed to their traditions, she represented the future he had always envisioned. "You shouldn't be out here alone," she said, dismounting with fluid grace. "Windspeaker has been asking for you since sunrise." Running Wolf nodded, his eyes still fixed on the donkey. "Do you see it?" he asked. Nima followed his gaze, her brow furrowing. "The donkey? It's hard to miss. Where did it come from?" "That's what troubles me," he hesitated. "It carries a message from my grandfather." Nima's sharp intake of breath told him she understood the impossibility. "Grandfather has been gone for 20 winters, yes." Running Wolf finally turned to face her. "We need to speak with Windspeaker." The ride back to the reservation was silent, each lost in thought. The tribal lands spread before them, 180,000 acres that represented only a fraction of their ancestral territory. To outsiders, the land might appear barren, but to the Apache, every ridge and wash held meaning, history, and sustenance. They passed the new clinic where Nima worked 3 days each week. Its modern structure a stark contrast to the traditional dwellings that still dotted the reservation. Children played basketball on a court beside the tribal school, their laughter carrying on the morning breeze. At the edge of the settlement stood Windspeaker's home, its walls made of traditional adobe but reinforced with modern materials. The 80-year-old elder was the tribe's connection to the old ways, the keeper of stories that stretched back beyond written history. The old man was waiting on his porch, as if he had known they would come. His lined face remained impassive, but his eyes, still sharp despite his years, fixed immediately on Running Wolf's pocket, where the note lay hidden. You've seen it then, Windspeaker said. Not a question. Running Wolf nodded, removing the note carefully. How did you know? I dreamed of a beast with the burden of memory. The elder's voice was like dry leaves rustling. Our ancestors grow restless. Inside Windspeaker's home, the air hung heavy with sage and cedar. Shelves lined with books on tribal law and history shared space with traditional medicines and ceremonial objects. But Running Wolf's attention was drawn to the clay vessel displayed prominently on a hand-woven blanket. The earth remembers what men forget, Windspeaker said, following his gaze. He lifted the ancient clay water vessel, its surface decorated with geometric patterns in faded red and black pigments. This was created when our people first made peace with the settlers. Water shared from this vessel sealed promises. His gnarled fingers traced the patterns. Some promises were kept, others were broken. Running Wolf placed the note on the table between them. Windspeaker did not reach for it, but his expression darkened as if he could read the words through the folded paper. 7 words, Running Wolf said. The blood debt must be paid now. Windspeaker closed his eyes. Then it has begun. What has begun? Nima asked, her voice sharp with concern. What blood debt? The old man looked between them, weighing his words. There are stories not told around the council fires, truths kept by only a few in each generation. He placed the ancient vessel back on its place of honor. Your grandfather made a pact to protect our people. The Guardian has returned because that pact is in danger. Guardian! Running Wolf frowned. You mean that half-starved donkey? Windspeaker's laugh held no humor. What you see is only a shadow of what is. The true form of the Guardian appears when the blood oath is threatened. He looked directly at Running Wolf. Tell me, Chief, have you been approached about the canyon lands recently? The question sent a chill through Running Wolf's body. Just last week, representatives from Stone Development had increased their offer for mineral rights in the sacred canyon. How could you know that? He whispered. Because this has happened before, Windspeaker replied. And now the debt comes due. The council meeting hall buzzed with nervous energy as Running Wolf entered, flanked by Nima and Windspeaker. Conversation died instantly. News traveled quickly on the reservation. Everyone had heard about the mysterious donkey. Running Wolf took his place at the head of the circle, noting the empty chair to his right. Sheriff Marcus Taylor was late, unusual for a man who prided himself on punctuality. The sheriff had grown up alongside Running Wolf before leaving the reservation for the police academy. Now he straddled 2 worlds, wearing a county badge while still attending tribal ceremonies. As if summoned by the thought, the door swung open and Marcus entered, his uniform crisp despite the desert dust. His eyes met Running Wolf's with a silent apology before taking his seat. I called this council for matters beyond our usual concerns, Running Wolf began, his deep voice filling the room. This morning I found a visitor is approaching, interrupted Windspeaker, his head cocked toward the door. Seconds later, the hall's entrance opened again. A tall man in an expensive suit entered, his smile practiced and confident. Garrett Stone, 3rd-generation developer, grandson of the copper baron whose mines had once ringed tribal lands. His company had been pressuring the council for access to the canyon for months. Forgive my intrusion, Stone said, his voice smooth as polished stone. I was in the area and thought I might observe your proceedings. His eyes scanned the room, assessing each face as if pricing property. Public meetings, after all? Running Wolf's jaw tightened. This is tribal business, Mr. Stone. Of course, Stone nodded, backing toward a bench along the wall. I'll be silent as the grave. Sheriff Taylor's hand moved to his belt. Resting near his weapon, a gesture not lost on Running Wolf, something had the lawman on edge. As I was saying, Running Wolf continued, this morning I discovered something unusual at the sacred canyon. A donkey chained there with a message that concerns our people. Murmurs rippled through the council. Windspeaker remained silent, his ancient eyes fixed on Stone, who maintained his pleasant mask. Before Running Wolf could continue, Nima stood and crossed to a locked cabinet at the room's edge. From it, she withdrew a leather-bound book, its cover worn smooth by generations of hands. "The tribal registry," she explained, returning to place it before her father. The leather-bound book was more than a simple record. For over 150 years, every birth, death, marriage, and significant event in tribal history had been meticulously recorded within its pages. When government officials had tried to dissolve their tribe in the 1950s, this registry had helped prove their continuous existence. Running Wolf's fingers traced the embossed leather before opening to the final entries. There, in his own handwriting, were the records of the last year: births, 3 deaths, the completion of the new water project. But he turned backward, searching for entries from his grandfather's time. "The message I found," he said quietly, "was written in my grandfather's hand." "A man 20 years dead." Stone shifted in his seat. Sheriff Taylor's eyes narrowed. "Impossible," someone whispered. "And yet, I recognized it instantly." Running Wolf found the page he sought, entries from 60 years past, written in the distinctive slant of his grandfather's script. He held the book open, pointing to the handwriting. "This is the same hand that wrote the note I found this morning." Windspeaker rose slowly, his movements deliberate. "There is more to tell than just a note." All eyes turned to the elder as he spoke of the canyon's history, a place of vision quests and ancient burials, but also a place where agreements were made. As he spoke, Running Wolf noticed Stone's expression changing, the practiced smile replaced by genuine interest. "The canyon has always been a boundary between worlds," Windspeaker concluded, "and boundaries must sometimes be defended." Sheriff Taylor cleared his throat. "That's actually why I'm late. My deputies reported strange tracks around the canyon perimeter this morning. Not animal, not quite human either." Stone leaned forward. "I find this all fascinating, truly. But surely you don't believe in spirits and monsters in this day and age." His smile returned, condescending now. Running Wolf closed the registry, his decision made. "Mr. Stone, this council needs to discuss private matters. I must ask you to leave." Stone stood, brushing invisible dust from his immaculate suit. "Of course. But before I go..." He withdrew an envelope from his jacket pocket. "My company has revised our offer for development rights. Significantly upward." He placed the envelope on the council table. "The future is coming to this valley, Chief Running Wolf. The only question is whether your people will prosper from it or be left behind. Again." After Stone departed, Sheriff Taylor moved closer. "I don't trust him." "Never have." "Nor I," Running Wolf agreed, leaving the envelope untouched. "But we have greater concerns now." He turned to Windspeaker. "Tell them what you told us about the blood debt." Windspeaker's face was grave as he looked around the circle of concerned faces. "Long ago, when our people were desperate, Running Wolf's grandfather made a pact to ensure our survival. Now the Guardian has returned because that pact is threatened." "What Guardian?" asked a council member. "The beast in the canyon is merely its vessel," Windspeaker replied, "and it will not leave until the debt is paid." Dawn had not yet broken when Running Wolf and Windspeaker returned to the sacred canyon. The old medicine man had insisted they go alone, without even Nima or the sheriff. Some matters, he said, were not for everyone's eyes. The donkey remained where Running Wolf had first discovered it, as if it hadn't moved in the night. Its massive form was silhouetted against the lightening eastern sky, chains glinting in the pre-dawn glow. "Approach it from the front," Windspeaker instructed, his voice barely above a whisper. "Let it see your intentions." Running Wolf moved slowly, hands visible, eyes locked with the creature's. Up close, the donkey's size was even more apparent, standing nearly as tall as a horse, with oversized ears that swiveled to track his movement. Its eyes, amber-brown and unnervingly intelligent, studied him without fear. "The note," Windspeaker prompted. With careful movements, Running Wolf withdrew the yellowed paper from his pocket. 7 words in his grandfather's hand. "The blood debt must be paid now." "Read it aloud," the elder commanded. The words seemed to hang in the still air. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the donkey snorted, pawing at the ground with a hoof that seemed too delicate for its massive frame. It turned its neck, revealing something Running Wolf hadn't noticed before, a pattern of darker hair that formed distinct shapes across its shoulder. Wind Speaker sucked in a sharp breath. "The binding signs," he whispered, reaching into his medicine bag. He withdrew a small wooden box, its surface darkened with age and handling. Intricate carvings decorated its surface, the same symbols that appeared in the donkey's coat. "What is that?" Running Wolf asked. "Your grandfather's spirit box." Wind Speaker's fingers traced the carvings. "It contains earth from sacred places, items of power. Every medicine man creates one in his lifetime." The box was no larger than Wind Speaker's palm, but it seemed to grow heavier in Running Wolf's perception as he stared at it. "How do you have this?" "It should have been buried with him. He gave it to me the night before he died." Wind Speaker's voice dropped even lower. "He said I would know when it was needed again." The donkey's ears flicked forward at the sight of the box. It made a sound, not quite a bray, deeper and more resonant than should have been possible for such a creature. "It recognizes the box," Running Wolf observed. Wind Speaker nodded grimly. "Because they are connected." He stepped forward, holding the spirit box toward the donkey. "Show us the truth you carry, Guardian." The air around the donkey seemed to shimmer, like heat rising from summer rocks. For a heartbeat, Running Wolf thought he saw something else overlaid on the donkey's form, something larger, with features that didn't match any animal he knew. Wind Speaker began to chant in the old language, words Running Wolf only partially understood. As the chant grew in intensity, the elder opened the box. Inside lay a pinch of red earth, a hawk feather, and a small silver medallion. The medallion caught the growing light, reflecting it with unnatural brightness. Running Wolf could make out engravings, half tribal symbols, half Spanish script. The donkey's reaction was immediate and violent. It reared back, chains clanking, then slammed its front hooves into the ground with such force that dust billowed around them. Its eyes rolled, showing white, and it let out a sound that couldn't possibly have come from any donkey. A deep, reverberating call that echoed off the canyon walls. Wind Speaker staggered as if struck, the box tumbling from his hands. The medallion spilled out, landing in the dust between them and the agitated beast. Wind Speaker. Running Wolf caught the elder as he collapsed, his thin body suddenly heavy. The old man's eyes were unfocused, lips moving silently. When he spoke, his voice had changed, deeper, with cadences Running Wolf had never heard from him before. "The earth remembers what men forget," Wind Speaker intoned. The same words he had spoken about the water vessel, but now they carried new weight. Blood spilled without honor, promises made in desperation. The Guardian returns when balance must be restored. His gnarled hand clutched at Running Wolf's shirt. "Your grandfather made a bargain with shadows to save our people. The cost was his soul, and yours." The medallion at their feet began to spin, seemingly of its own accord, the engraved symbols blurring until it finally fell flat. The donkey grew calm, its breathing returning to normal. Wind Speaker's eyes cleared. He looked up at Running Wolf with renewed focus. "We must return to the reservation now." "Why? What did you see?" "The water," Wind Speaker said urgently. "The wells will be turning bitter, even as we speak." As they mounted their horses to leave, Running Wolf glanced back at the donkey. It stood watching them, unnaturally still. The morning light now clearly revealed the symbol pattern in its coat, a map of the sacred canyon, with a single spot marked where no trail had ever existed. The medallion lay where it had fallen. Running Wolf dismounted to retrieve it, feeling its weight, too heavy for its size, as if it contained more than just silver. "Leave it," Wind Speaker warned. "It belonged to my grandfather." "No," the old man said. "It belonged to them both, your grandfather and the Guardian. It is the physical manifestation of their pact." Running Wolf hesitated, then tucked the medallion into his pocket. "Then I should understand what he promised." Wind Speaker's face was grim. "You will wish you hadn't." Chaos greeted Running Wolf and Wind Speaker upon their return to the reservation. People gathered around the community well, faces twisted with concern. Children cried as adults argued, their voices rising in frustration. Nima broke away from the crowd when she spotted them. "Father, something's wrong with the water." "All of it. Every well, every tap." Running Wolf dismounted, Windspeaker's prophecy ringing in his ears. "How bad? See for yourself." She handed him a mason jar filled with water that should have been clear. Instead, it was cloudy with a rust-colored tinge. He unscrewed the lid and immediately recoiled from the sulphurous smell. This wasn't mere contamination. The water smelled of death and decay. "It started about an hour ago," Nima explained. "I've called the Indian Health Service, but they won't be here until afternoon." Running Wolf passed the jar to Windspeaker, who didn't bother to smell it. The old man's expression confirmed what they both already knew. This was no natural phenomenon. "Get everyone to use the emergency reserves," Running Wolf instructed Nima. "Tell them not to drink from any well or tap until further notice." As she hurried away, Sheriff Taylor's patrol vehicle pulled up, dust billowing behind it. The lawman wasn't alone. A black SUV with government plates followed close behind. "We've got trouble," Taylor said without preamble as he approached. More than just the water. Two men in suits emerged from the SUV, their stiff posture and close-cropped hair marking them as government officials before they even flashed their identification. "Bureau of Land Management," the taller one announced. "I'm Agent Keller, this is Agent Ramirez. We need to speak with the tribal leadership immediately." Running Wolf straightened to his full height. "Weston, I am Chief Running Wolf. What brings the BLM to our reservation unannounced?" Agent Keller reached into his jacket and withdrew a leather portfolio. From it, he removed a set of documents protected in plastic sleeves. "We're here regarding a boundary dispute that's recently come to our attention." Running Wolf accepted the papers, a sense of dread settling in his stomach even before he examined them. The documents were old, the paper yellowed, but the government seals were unmistakable. Survey maps, land patents, and legal descriptions filled several pages. "According to our records," Uda, Keller continued, "the eastern portion of what you call Sacred Canyon was never officially included in the 1934 reservation boundaries. It seems there was a surveying error that's gone uncorrected for decades." Windspeaker made a sound, somewhere between a laugh and a snort. "Convenient timing for such a discovery." Agent Ramirez shifted uncomfortably, but Keller maintained his professional demeanor. "The Bureau is simply correcting an administrative oversight. The portion in question is approximately 300 acres. 300 acres that have been used by my people for centuries," Running Wolf countered, still scanning the documents. Something caught his eye, a signature at the bottom of one page. His grandfather's name, the same distinctive handwriting as the note. Sheriff Taylor peered over his shoulder. "These papers are over 60 years old. Why bring this up now?" Keller cleared his throat. "Recent interest in resource development has prompted a review of land surveys throughout the region." "Stone development," Running Wolf said flatly. "It wasn't a question. I'm not at liberty to discuss private business matters," Keller replied, but his slight hesitation was confirmation enough. As they spoke, a woman approached from the direction of the clinic, carrying a battered metal box. Dr. Susan White Eagle, the reservation's physician and Nima's colleague, looked troubled. "Chief, you need to see this," she said, extending the box toward him. "It was delivered to the clinic this morning. The courier said it was important you receive it today." The box was roughly the size of a shoebox, its metal surface scratched and dented with age. A tarnished brass plate on the lid bore a single word: evidence. "Evidence of what?" Running Wolf asked, taking the box. "It was unexpectedly heavy." Dr. White Eagle shook her head. "I don't know. It was sealed. And the paperwork only said it belonged to the tribe and had been held in a government archive until now." Running Wolf set the box on the hood of the sheriff's vehicle and carefully lifted the lid. Inside, nestled in yellowed cotton batting, lay a carved stone figurine, a donkey remarkably similar to the one in the canyon, but with exaggerated features that made it almost monstrous. Around its neck was carved a chain, and on its back, strange symbols that matched those on the living donkey's coat. Beneath the figurine lay a folder, marked classified, with a declassification, stamp dated just 1 week earlier. Windspeaker inhaled sharply. "The Weeper," he whispered, pointing at the figurine. "From the old stories." Running Wolf gingerly opened the folder. Inside were photographs, black and white images from what appeared to be the 1950s. They showed the sacred canyon, but not as he knew it. In the photos, the canyon floor was scarred with what looked like mining operations. Men in work clothes stood beside heavy equipment. In one photo, his grandfather appeared, much younger but unmistakable, shaking hands with a white man in a suit. On the back of this photo, someone had written, "Agreement sealed, RW&JS, Sacred Canyon Silver Co." Running Wolf's fingers trembled as he showed the photo to Windspeaker. "Yes, could that be James Stone?" Sheriff Taylor finished. Garrett Stone's grandfather. Agent Keller cleared his throat. "Chief Running Wolf, I regret to inform you that the tribe has 30 days to produce documentation supporting your claim to the disputed territory, or the federal government will reassert control over those 300 acres. Running Wolf barely heard him, his attention fixed on the stone figurine. It seemed to grow warmer in his hand, as if awakening after a long sleep. Windspeaker leaned close. "Now we know," he murmured. "The blood oath was between your grandfather and Stone's. The Guardian has returned because one side has broken faith." Agent Keller was still talking. "Environmental assessment team will arrive tomorrow to—" "No," Running Wolf interrupted. "No one enters the canyon until this matter is resolved." "With all due respect, Chief," Keller said, his tone hardening, "you don't have the authority to—" Sheriff Taylor stepped forward. "Actually, as county law enforcement, I can declare the area temporarily restricted due to public safety concerns." He nodded toward the jar of contaminated water. "We have an environmental emergency here that needs investigation." The BLM agents exchanged glances. 48 hours, Keller finally conceded. "Then we proceed with or without your cooperation." As the agents returned to their vehicle, Running Wolf stared down at the stone figurine. The donkey's carved eyes seemed to look back at him, knowing and judging. 30 days, he murmured. To solve a mystery 60 years old, the tribal council chamber had been transformed into an impromptu research center. Maps and documents covered the long table, spilling onto extra folding tables, hastily brought in from the community center. Nima organized everything with methodical precision, creating a timeline on one wall with photos, documents, and sticky notes. Running Wolf watched his daughter work, pride mingling with concern. Since dawn, she'd been diving into tribal records, searching for anything that might explain the mystery of the donkey and the blood debt. 3 tribal elders assisted, their knowledge of oral histories proving invaluable as they connected written documents to remembered stories. Sheriff Taylor entered, carrying a cardboard box of files. "County records from the 1950s, he announced, setting it down. "Had to call in some favors at the courthouse to get these." Running Wolf nodded his thanks, then turned as Windspeaker shuffled in, carrying something wrapped in a red cloth. "I found it," the old man said simply, carefully placing the bundle on the table and unwrapping it. A wooden mask stared up at them, ancient, its features both human and animal, carved from a single piece of pine, darkened with age. The eye holes were empty, but somehow seemed to hold shadow even in the bright room. The mouth was open in what might have been a laugh or a scream. "The transformation mask," Windspeaker explained, "worn only during the most sacred ceremonies, when our medicine men needed to speak directly to the spirits." Running Wolf knew of the mask but had never seen it. His grandfather had hidden away many ceremonial items during the years when government agents had tried to suppress tribal religions. "How will this help us?" he asked. "It belonged to your grandfather. His spirit energy remains in the wood." Windspeaker ran gnarled fingers along the mask's contours. "With the proper ceremony, it might show us what happened in the canyon." Nima approached cautiously. "Is it safe to use something so powerful?" "No," Windspeaker admitted. "But neither is allowing the blood debt to remain unpaid." A coughing fit seized Running Wolf suddenly, deep, racking coughs that bent him double. Everyone froze, watching with concern as he struggled to catch his breath. "Father!" Nima was at his side instantly, medical training taking over as she checked his pulse. "I'm fine," he managed, waving her away. Just the dust, but it wasn't dust, and they both knew it. The illness had been growing for months. Weight loss, fatigue, the cough that wouldn't heal. Running Wolf had visited doctors in Phoenix who used words like aggressive and treatment options, but he had chosen to keep his condition private. Only Nima knew the full diagnosis. Windspeaker's knowing gaze met his. The old man said nothing, but his eyes conveyed understanding. "Some secrets couldn't be hidden from a medicine man. We should continue," Running Wolf said, straightening with effort. Nima reluctantly returned to her timeline while Taylor opened the county records box. Windspeaker carefully rewrapped the mask, setting it aside for later use. "What do we know so far?" Running Wolf asked, surveying the materials they'd gathered. Nima pointed to the timeline. "From what we can piece together, something happened in the mid-1950s, involving grandfather and James Stone. There was a silver mining operation in the canyon that doesn't appear in any official tribal histories." Taylor nodded. "The county records show mining permits issued, then abruptly cancelled in 1956. No explanation given." "The stories say the canyon has always been sacred," one of the elders added. "A place where the spirit world touches ours. Why would our leaders ever allow mining there?" Windspeaker's voice was heavy with the weight of unspoken knowledge. "Those were desperate times. The government had terminated many tribes, taking their lands. Our people were starving, our children taken to boarding schools. Perhaps your grandfather made choices he would not have made in better times." Running Wolf studied the photograph of his grandfather shaking hands with James Stone. What agreement had they reached? And how did it connect to the donkey and the note? His thoughts were interrupted by a commotion outside. Angry voices rose, followed by the sound of breaking glass. Sheriff Taylor was first to the door, hand on his weapon. "Stay here," he ordered, stepping outside. Running Wolf ignored the instruction, following closely behind. In the parking area outside the council building, a group of younger tribal members confronted two men in BLM uniforms who stood beside a government truck. "You have no right to be here," shouted one young man, pointing accusingly. The BLM officers looked uncomfortable, but stood their ground. "We're just doing preliminary survey work as authorized," one replied. Before the situation could escalate further, a sleek black Range Rover pulled up. Garrett Stone emerged, immaculately dressed as always, his expression concerned. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, approaching with confident strides. The arrival of Stone shifted the crowd's anger immediately. "You're the problem," someone called out. "Trying to steal more of our land." Stone raised his hands in a placating gesture. "No one is stealing anything. I'm simply pursuing legal development of resources that could benefit everyone." His eyes found Running Wolf in the crowd. "Chief, perhaps we could speak privately. I believe I have information that might help clarify this situation." The crowd muttered disapprovingly, but Running Wolf raised a hand for silence. "My office. 5 minutes." As the group dispersed, Running Wolf felt a strange sensation, a prickling along his spine, a sense of being watched. He turned toward the hills that led to the sacred canyon, miles away. There, impossibly, stood the donkey. It should not have been visible at this distance, yet he could see it clearly, its eyes fixed on him, its massive form silhouetted against the sky. In that moment, Running Wolf understood with sudden clarity. The Guardian was watching, judging their actions. And time was running out. "Let's be frank with each other, Chief Running Wolf." Garrett Stone leaned forward in his chair, elbows resting on the desk between them. "We both know there's more to this situation than a simple land dispute." Running Wolf remained impassive, studying the developer's face. Stone's expression was earnest, but his eyes, calculating, assessing, gave him away. Like his grandfather before him, Garrett Stone was a businessman first and foremost. "What do you know about the canyon?" Running Wolf asked. Stone reached into his briefcase and withdrew a leather-bound book, its spine cracked with age and use. "My grandfather's personal diary," he explained, placing it on the desk. "I found it after he died, locked in his study safe. It contains unusual entries about his dealings with your grandfather." Running Wolf made no move to touch the book. "And you're sharing this out of the goodness of your heart." A thin smile crossed Stone's face. "Let's say I'm motivated by self-interest and a healthy respect for things I don't understand." He tapped the diary. "According to this, our grandfathers made an agreement involving the canyon, an agreement sealed with something more binding than legal documents." Outside the office window, dark clouds gathered suddenly, unusual for the season. A low rumble of thunder rolled across the reservation. "What happened to the mining operation?" Running Wolf asked. Stone's expression tightened. "That's where things get complicated. The diary entries become erratic. There are references to accidents, workers refusing to enter certain parts of the canyon." He hesitated. "And something my grandfather called the Guardian, the same term Windspeaker had used." Running Wolf felt a chill, despite the office's warmth. "The operation shut down abruptly in late 1956, Stone continued. "My grandfather never attempted to restart it, despite geological surveys indicating substantial silver deposits. He forbade my father from ever pursuing mining in that canyon. Yet here you are, pursuing exactly that." Stone spread his hands. "Times change, superstitions fade." But his eyes shifted away as he spoke. Before Running Wolf could respond, a commotion erupted outside. He rose quickly, moving to the window. What he saw froze him in place. The storm clouds had coalesced directly over the reservation, unnaturally dark and swirling. As he watched, a bolt of lightning struck the water tower at the reservation's edge with a deafening crack. People scattered as water gushed from the ruptured tank. What the hell? Stone had joined him at the window, his composure slipping. Running Wolf turned to him. "When did you first approach the tribal council about developing the canyon?" 6 months ago, Stone replied, still staring at the water tower. "And when did you first enter the sacred canyon yourself?" Stone hesitated. "About 7 months ago. Just a preliminary survey with a geologist. Why?" 7 months, around the time Running Wolf had first noticed his symptoms. The timing couldn't be coincidence. The office door burst open as Sheriff Taylor rushed in. "You need to see this," he said urgently, handing Running Wolf his phone. On the screen was a text message with an attached image from one of his deputies. The photo showed the donkey, still in the canyon, but now surrounded by at least a dozen dead ravens, their black bodies scattered around its hooves. "That's not all," Taylor continued. "We're getting reports of strange animal behavior all over the county. Livestock breaking through fences, wildlife appearing in town. And the weather—" He gestured toward the window. Stone peered at the phone screen. "What the hell is that thing? Some kind of mutant burrow?" Running Wolf ignored the question, instead fixing Stone with an intense gaze. "Your grandfather's diary, does it mention a blood oath?" The developer's face paled visibly. "How did you know about that?" "I need to see those entries, now." As Stone flipped through the diary, searching for the relevant passages, Nima entered without knocking. "Father Windspeaker says it's time. The ceremony must be tonight." Running Wolf nodded, then noticed what she carried. A large turquoise pendant, its surface intricately inlaid with silver, in the shape of a thunderbird. The pendant hung from a braided leather cord, its blue-green surface seeming to capture and intensify the strange light from the storm outside. "Grandfather's thunderbird," she explained, holding out the pendant. "Windspeaker said you would need to wear it for protection during the ceremony." Running Wolf accepted the pendant, feeling its substantial weight. The silver inlay was tarnished with age, but the turquoise remained vibrant. According to family stories, his great-great-grandfather had crafted it after a vision quest, embedding it with prayers for protection and clear sight. Stone had found the passage he sought, but his attention was now fixed on the pendant. "That design," he said, voice strangely tight. "It's in my grandfather's diary, too." He turned the book to show a crude sketch on one page, the same thunderbird pattern, accompanied by handwritten notes in margins. Running Wolf slipped the pendant over his head. "Your grandfather saw things in that canyon that changed him. made him abandon a profitable venture, made him warn future generations away. He leaned across the desk. Yet you ignored those warnings. Why? Stone's confident facade cracked further. 300 million in proven silver deposits, he admitted. Possibly double that. And what is your family's blood worth, Mr. Stone? Running Wolf asked softly. Before Stone could answer, a sound like a mournful horn echoed across the reservation, deep, resonant, impossible. Everyone froze, recognizing it as the same unnatural call the donkey had made in the canyon. It's coming from my house, Running Wolf realized with sudden dread. They rushed out into the storm, rain pelting them as they ran the short distance to the chief's residence. The door stood open, swinging in the wind. Inside, they found the stone figurine from the evidence box sitting in the center of the living room floor, exactly where Running Wolf had not left it. Around it, arranged in a perfect circle, were 7 dead mice. Stone staggered back. What is happening here? Running Wolf touched the Thunderbird pendant, drawing strength from its familiar weight. The Guardian is showing us that it can go anywhere, affect anything. The blood oath was broken, and now the debt must be paid. From the doorway, Windspeaker spoke, his voice carrying despite its softness. Tonight we will speak with the dead and learn the truth. Both of you must be present. His ancient eyes moved from Running Wolf to Stone. Both bloodlines are bound in this. The sky outside darkened further, midday transformed to dusk by unnatural clouds. In the distance, another mournful call echoed through the canyon. The storm passed as suddenly as it had appeared, leaving behind a reservation soaked and damaged but intact. By afternoon, Running Wolf had organized repair crews for the water tower and dispatched tribal members to check on elders living in more remote areas. Nima found him outside the clinic, helping stack sandbags where flash flooding threatened the building. You should rest, she said, medical concern evident in her voice. Your condition can wait, he interrupted, setting down a final bag. He lowered his voice. Have you made any progress with the research? Nima nodded, leading him away from the volunteers. We found something. She withdrew a folded paper from her pocket. This was filed with the county in 1956, then apparently forgotten. Running Wolf unfolded the document, a mining claim abandonment notice. The legal language was dense, but one section had been highlighted by Nima. Furthermore, all parties acknowledged the discovery of significant historical artifacts of cultural importance to the Red Mountain Apache tribe, necessitating the immediate cessation of all mining activities in accordance with historical artifacts. Running Wolf looked up. What did they find? That's just it. There's no record of any artifacts being catalogued or turned over to the tribe or any museum. Nima reclaimed the paper. But I found something else. The tribal archive had a box of old photographs from the 1950s. She handed him a black and white photograph, well preserved despite its age. It showed a group of men, miners, judging by their attire, standing around what appeared to be an excavation site in the canyon. Several wore expressions of concern or fear. In the center of the image, partially excavated from the rocky soil, was a strange object. Running Wolf studied it closely. The object was a stone bowl, large enough that a man could have curled up inside it. Its surface was carved with symbols identical to those that appeared on the donkey's coat. A ceremonial basin, he murmured, recognition dawning. I've heard of these in the oldest stories, but I've never seen one. Windspeaker identified it immediately, Nima confirmed. He called it the vessel of binding. According to him, it was used in ceremonies where oaths were sealed with blood sacrifices. Running Wolf felt the Thunderbird pendant grow warm against his chest as he stared at the photograph. Where is this basin now? That's the question, isn't it? The mining records indicate it was removed from the site, but there's no record of where it went. Nima hesitated. Windspeaker believes it's still in the canyon, hidden somewhere. A new voice joined their conversation. Not hidden, protected. They turned to find Sheriff Taylor approaching. Accompanied by an elderly Apache man, Running Wolf recognized as Benjamin Crow Dog, a reclusive tribal member who lived alone in the hills bordering the reservation. "Benjamin has something to tell you," Taylor explained. "Something he's kept to himself for 68 years. The old man's face was deeply lined, his eyes rheumy with age but still sharp with intelligence. "I worked for the mining company," he said without preamble. "I was young, needed the money. We were digging where we shouldn't have been." Running Wolf gestured toward the photograph. "You were there when they found this?" Benjamin nodded slowly. "Bad medicine from the start. Men got sick. Equipment broke down. Then we found that stone basin and things got worse." He rubbed his gnarled hands together. "Your grandfather came with the white boss stone. They argued, then made some kind of agreement." "What kind of agreement?" Nima pressed. "They took the basin deeper into the canyon, to a cave system the old ones used for ceremonies. I helped carry it. Heaviest thing I ever lifted." Benjamin's voice dropped. "They sent everyone else away, but I hid and watched. They cut their hands, let the blood drip into the basin, said words in the old language." Running Wolf exchanged glances with Nima. "What happened then?" Benjamin's expression grew troubled. "The blood. It didn't just sit there. It moved like it was alive, flowed into the carvings on the basin. And then," he stopped abruptly. "Then what?" Running Wolf urged. "Something came. Not a man, not an animal. Something in between." Benjamin made a warding gesture. "It spoke with my grandfather," Running Wolf said softly. The old man nodded. "Made a deal. The miners would leave the sacred places untouched, take silver only from the outer canyon. In return," he trailed off again. "In return for what?" Benjamin looked away. "In return, your grandfather promised the thing could take his soul when he died, and the soul of his grandson after him." Silence fell between them. Running Wolf felt a chill that had nothing to do with the damp air. Taylor cleared his throat. "Benjamin says he can show us where the cave is, where the basin was hidden." Running Wolf touched the Thunderbird pendant, drawing strength from it. "We need to go now, before the ceremony tonight." He turned to Benjamin. "Can you lead us there?" The old man nodded reluctantly. "Been avoiding that place my whole life. Swore I'd never go back." He sighed heavily. "But some oaths need to be broken, I guess." As they prepared to leave, Running Wolf noticed something gleaming in the mud near the clinic steps. He bent down, ignoring the protest of his aching body, and retrieved the object. It was a tarnished silver bell, small enough to fit in his palm, with a broken leather strap attached. The kind used by miners to signal shift changes or warnings. Its surface was dented and corroded, yet when he turned it over, he could still make out engraved lettering, "Sacred Canyon, Silver Cumber, 1956. Running Wolf felt an immediate connection to the object, as if it had been waiting for him to find it. He slipped it into his pocket alongside the medallion from the spirit box. "What was that?" Nima asked. "Just an old mining artifact," he replied, not entirely sure why he felt compelled to keep it. "Might be useful." As they drove toward the canyon with Benjamin and Sheriff Taylor, the sun began its descent toward the horizon. They had only a few hours of daylight left to find the basin before Windspeaker's ceremony. In his pocket, unfelt by Running Wolf, the small silver bell grew warm, resonating silently with the Thunderbird pendant around his neck and the medallion beside it, 3 pieces of a puzzle older than any of them could imagine. Benjamin led them along a barely visible trail that wound through the narrowest part of the sacred canyon. The old man moved with surprising agility despite his years, navigating the rocky terrain with the confidence of someone who had walked these paths in his dreams. "Not much further," he called back, pointing toward a sheer rock face ahead. "The entrance is hidden behind that overhang." Running Wolf followed closely, aware of the sun's accelerating descent toward the horizon. Beside him, Nima kept a watchful eye on his breathing, her medical training evident in the way she monitored his condition. Sheriff Taylor brought up the rear, occasionally glancing backward as if sensing they were being followed. They weren't alone in that feeling. Since entering the canyon, Running Wolf had felt eyes upon them, watching, assessing. The donkey was nowhere in sight, but its presence seemed to permeate the canyon like a scent carried on the breeze. "Here," Benjamin announced, stopping before what appeared to be a solid rock wall. He ran weathered hands over the surface, searching. "There used to be a way to—" His fingers found a nearly invisible crack. He pressed, and a section of rock shifted slightly. With Taylor's help, they pushed the hidden door open, revealing a dark passage beyond. The miners expanded a natural cave, Benjamin explained. Used it for storing explosives, away from the main camp. Taylor produced a flashlight, its beam illuminating a narrow tunnel that descended into darkness. The walls showed signs of both natural formation and human modification, chisel marks visible alongside ancient flowing patterns carved by water. "The basin is deep inside," Benjamin said, hesitating at the entrance. In a chamber they found that was already there before they started digging. Running Wolf stepped forward, then stopped as a wave of dizziness struck him. He steadied himself against the rock wall, feeling Nima's concerned hand on his arm. "I'm fine," he assured her, though the lie was becoming less convincing. The illness was progressing faster than the doctors had predicted. Accelerated perhaps by stress and recent events, they proceeded into the cave, their flashlight beams creating dancing shadows that seemed almost alive. The air grew cooler as they descended, heavy with mineral scents and an underlying mustiness. After about 50 yards, the tunnel opened into a larger chamber. Taylor's flashlight played across the walls, revealing what caused them all to halt in astonishment. The chamber was covered in paintings, ancient images rendered in red, black, and yellow ochre. Handprints, animal figures, and abstract symbols covered nearly every surface. "I don't remember these," Benjamin whispered, awe and fear mingling in his voice. Running Wolf approached the nearest wall, studying the images. Some depicted recognizable animals, deer, eagle, bear, while others showed beings that existed somewhere between human and animal forms. One figure appeared repeatedly, a large creature with elongated limbs and a head that resembled a donkey or mule, yet with features that were decidedly unsettling, too intelligent, too aware. "The Guardian," he murmured. Reaching out but stopping short of touching the ancient pigment, Nima was examining another section of wall. "Father, look at this!" She pointed to a sequence of images that seemed to tell a story. Human figures approached the donkey-headed being, offering something held in outstretched hands. In the next scene, the being towered over prostrate human forms. "A bargain," Running Wolf interpreted. "An offering in exchange for something." "Protection," Benjamin said from behind them. "Your grandfather said the Guardian was meant to protect sacred places from those who would desecrate them." Taylor had continued exploring the chamber, his flashlight beam catching something that glinted dully in the darkness. "I think I found what we're looking for." In the center of the chamber, partially embedded in the stone floor, sat the basin from the photograph. Approximately 4 feet across and carved from a single piece of dark stone, its interior was shaped like a shallow bowl. The rim and outer surface were covered with the same symbols they had seen on the donkey's coat. As they gathered around it, Running Wolf noticed something unusual, a dark stain that marked the basin's interior. Despite the decades that had passed, the stain retained a reddish-brown hue that could only be blood. "This is where they made their pact," he said. Benjamin nodded. "Your grandfather and Stone cut their hands and let the blood mix in the basin. Then they each said words, your grandfather in Apache, Stone in English. Do you remember the words?" Nima asked. The old man shook his head. "They made me swear never to repeat them, even if I remembered." His eyes darted around the chamber nervously. "We shouldn't be here. This place is watched." As if in answer to his words, a low vibration ran through the cave, causing dust and small stones to shower down from the ceiling. The flashlight beams wavered as Taylor and Nima steadied themselves. Running Wolf felt the medallion and bell grow warm in his pocket. Drawn by an instinct he couldn't explain, he removed both objects and placed them on the rim of the basin. The reaction was immediate. Both items began to vibrate audibly against the stone. "What are you doing?" Taylor asked, alarmed. "I'm not sure," Running Wolf admitted. He removed the Thunderbird pendant from around his neck and added it to the basin. The 3 objects, medallion, bell, and pendant, began to arrange themselves, sliding around the basin's rim as if pulled by magnetic force, forming a triangle. From deep within the cave system came a sound they recognized, the unnatural bray of the donkey. Closer than seemed possible. "We need to go," Benjamin urged, already backing toward the tunnel. "Now!" As they hurriedly gathered the objects from the basin, Running Wolf's hand brushed against the bloodstain. A jolt of energy, like static electricity but stronger, passed through him, bringing him to his knees. His vision blurred, replaced by rapid flashes of images. His grandfather, younger, desperate, agreeing to terms spoken by a shadow. The Guardian, its true form glimpsed briefly, accepting the blood offering. James Stone, face pale with fear, yet determined to protect his investment. A promise. Protection for the tribe in exchange for two souls, grandfather and grandson. A betrayal. Someone breaking the terms, entering forbidden ground. Running Wolf gasped as the vision released him, finding himself supported by Nima and Taylor. "We need to get back," he managed. "Winespeaker needs to know what I saw." As they retreated from the cave, Running Wolf noticed something in the dust near the basin, a small object half buried in the dirt. He reached down and retrieved it, a tarnished silver whistle on a leather cord, similar in age and style to the mining bell. Without knowing why, he felt certain this whistle was significant, another piece of the puzzle that was gradually taking shape. He slipped it into his pocket, alongside the other objects, as they hurried from the cave. Outside, twilight had descended on the canyon, and there, silhouetted against the deepening blue of the sky, stood the donkey, watching, waiting, judging. Sunset painted the reservation in fiery hues as they returned. Winespeaker waited outside the council building, his ancient face revealing nothing as they approached. Without a word, he gestured for them to follow him inside. The council chamber had been transformed in their absence. The research materials were pushed to the walls, and the center of the room now held a circle of smooth river stones. Within the circle, a small fire burned in a clay brazier, filling the room with the aromatic smoke of sage and cedar. Garrett Stone stood uncomfortably to one side, looking out of place in his expensive suit. His eyes widened when he saw Running Wolf. "You look terrible," he said bluntly. It wasn't an exaggeration. The vision in the cave had taken a toll. Running Wolf could feel the illness advancing, spreading through his body like smoke through a forest. His hands trembled slightly as he placed the objects they had found, medallion, bell and whistle, on a small table near the circle. "What did you find?" Winespeaker asked. Running Wolf described the cave, the paintings, and the ceremonial basin. When he mentioned his vision, the old medicine man nodded, as if confirming something he already knew. "The blood oath is clear now," Winespeaker said. "Your grandfather offered his soul and that of his grandson, you, in exchange for protection of the tribe. Stone's grandfather agreed to keep the sacred places untouched. Both sealed the pact with blood, but someone broke the agreement," Nima added. Winespeaker nodded. "The Guardian has returned because the pact was violated." His eyes shifted to Stone. "Your drilling surveys entered the forbidden areas of the canyon." Stone stiffened defensively. "I had no knowledge of any forbidden areas. There was nothing in the property records, nothing in any legal document." "Yet your grandfather's diary warned against it," Running Wolf interrupted. "You chose to ignore those warnings." Before Stone could respond, Sheriff Taylor entered carrying a dusty cardboard box. "Found this at the county recorder's office," he announced. "It was misfiled for decades." He placed the box on the table and removed its contents, a leather portfolio that had once been elegant but was now cracked with age. Inside were surveying documents, including a large folded map. Taylor carefully unfolded the brittle paper, revealing a detailed survey of the Sacred Canyon from 1956. Unlike modern maps, this one contained unusual notations. Red boundaries marked areas labeled "Restricted No Entry" in faded ink. Notes in the margins, written in the same hand as James Stone's diary, warned, "Honor the agreement or face consequences." Most telling was a small drawing in one corner, the same donkey-headed figure from the cave paintings. rendered with surprising detail for what was supposedly an official document. Stone stared at his grandfather's handwriting, his composure finally cracking. "He never told my father." "Never told me." His voice held a mixture of anger and bewilderment. "Why keep this secret? Why not pass down the warning properly?" "Shame, perhaps," Windspeaker suggested. "Fear that he would not be believed. Or maybe he thought the pack died with him." The old man shook his head. "But such bargains do not end with death." Running Wolf studied the map, noting that the boundaries of the restricted areas corresponded exactly with Stone Development's proposed drilling sites. The coincidence was too perfect. "The Guardian led you there deliberately," Windspeaker said, as if reading his thoughts. "It wants the debt acknowledged and paid." Stone ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair, disheveling it. "What does that mean? What debt?" "I didn't make any blood oath, but you are your grandfather's blood," Windspeaker replied. "As Running Wolf is his grandfather's. The oath binds the bloodlines, not just the men who made it." Nima had been examining the objects from the cave. "These items are all connected to the mining operation," she observed. "Why are they important?" Windspeaker approached the table, his movements slow but deliberate. "Objects present during a blood oath become vessels for the agreement. They hold the power and memory of the pact." He gestured toward the artifacts. "These were witnesses. They can help us communicate with the Guardian during the ceremony." From outside came the now familiar sound, the unnatural call of the donkey. Closer to the reservation than it had ever been before, Running Wolf moved to the window. In the gathering darkness, he could make out the donkey's massive form, standing at the edge of the tribal housing area. People were emerging from their homes, drawn by the sound, pointing and gathering in small, nervous clusters. "It's time," Windspeaker announced. "The ceremony cannot wait." As they prepared to leave, Taylor stopped them. "One more thing you should see." He reached into the box and removed a cloth-wrapped object. This was with the map. He unwrapped a leather gun belt, the leather darkened with age but still supple. The holster contained an old revolver, a Colt single-action army with yellowed ivory grips. Etched into one grip panel was a name, J. Stone. "My grandfather's gun," Stone said, recognition in his voice. "He always claimed he lost it." Windspeaker examined the weapon without touching it. "Another witness to the pact," he confirmed. "And perhaps more than that." Running Wolf felt drawn to the revolver. Without conscious decision, he reached for it, his fingers closing around the grip. As he lifted it from the holster, a sensation like an electric current ran up his arm. The room around him seemed to waver, and for an instant, he thought he saw his grandfather standing across from him, mouth moving in silent words. The moment passed as quickly as it had come, leaving Running Wolf breathless and even more weakened. The revolver felt impossibly heavy in his hand, as if made of something denser than metal. "The gun remembers what happened," Windspeaker said quietly. "It was more than a witness. It was part of the pact itself." Stone stared at the weapon, his expression troubled. "What do you mean?" "The Guardian required more than just blood to seal the agreement," the old man explained. "It demanded a sacrifice, a life." All eyes turned to the ancient medicine man. "Whose life?" Running Wolf asked, though part of him already knew the answer. Windspeaker met his gaze steadily. "That is what the ceremony will reveal. That is what you must be prepared to learn and to face." Outside, the donkey called again, its cry now sounding almost like a human voice in pain. Twilight deepened as they gathered at the canyon's edge. Windspeaker had chosen a flat expanse of rock overlooking the area where the donkey had first appeared. The creature itself was nowhere to be seen, but its presence lingered in the air like static before a storm. Tribal members had assembled a ceremonial space, according to Windspeaker's instructions. A large circle of white cornmeal marked the boundaries, with 4 smaller circles at the cardinal points. In the center burned a small fire of cedar and pinon pine. Running Wolf stood by the eastern point, the collection of artifacts from the cave arranged before him, the medallion, the bell, the whistle, and the revolver. Around his neck hung the Thunderbird pendant, His body felt heavier with each passing hour, the illness advancing at an unnatural pace. Garrett Stone waited at the western point, his usual confidence replaced by wary uncertainty. He had changed from his business suit into jeans and a button-down shirt, still expensive, but at least practical for the setting. Windspeaker completed a final inspection of the ceremonial space, then nodded to Nima, who stood just outside the circle. "You will maintain the fire," he instructed her. "Sheriff Taylor will keep others away. No one else must enter the circle once we begin," Taylor nodded, already positioning himself to block the small crowd of curious tribal members who had followed them, despite warnings to stay away. As Nima took her position, Windspeaker approached Running Wolf, carrying a small leather pouch. "Before we begin, there is something you must have," he said, untying the pouch's drawstring. From within, he withdrew a stone knife, obsidian, its edge still sharp despite its obvious age. The handle was wrapped in faded leather strips, stained dark with what could only be ancient blood. "This is grandfather's," Running Wolf recognized, though he had never seen it before. Windspeaker nodded. "The blood letter. It has been in your family for 7 generations. Your grandfather used it in the original pact." He offered the knife reverently. "Tonight you must carry it." Running Wolf accepted the blade, feeling its weight, physical and spiritual, in his palm. The obsidian seemed to absorb the fading light, rather than reflect it. "What exactly will happen in this ceremony?" Stone asked, eyeing the knife warily. "We will open a doorway," Windspeaker replied. "The Guardian will speak through me. You will both learn the true nature of the pact your grandfathers made, and what must be done to settle the debt." "And if we don't like the terms?" Stone pressed. Windspeaker's expression remained impassive. "The time for negotiation passed when your drilling equipment crossed the forbidden boundaries." He gestured toward the ceremonial space. "Take your positions. It begins now." As they entered the circle, the fire in the center flared suddenly higher, casting long shadows across the rocky ground. Windspeaker began to chant in the old language, his voice stronger than seemed possible from his frail body. Running Wolf felt the knife grow warm in his hand as the chanting intensified. The artifacts before him began to vibrate slightly against the stone, as if responding to the ancient words. Across the circle, Stone shifted uncomfortably, glancing toward the gathering darkness beyond the firelight. "Something's out there," he whispered. Running Wolf followed his gaze but saw only shadows. Yet he too could sense movement in the darkness, a presence circling, watching, waiting. Windspeaker's chant reached a crescendo, then stopped abruptly. In the sudden silence, the medicine man's body went rigid. When he spoke again, his voice had changed, deeper, resonant with power and age. "The pact was made in blood and must be honored in blood," he intoned, eyes unfocused, seeing something beyond the physical world. "The Guardian accepted 2 souls as payment for protection. The first has been claimed. The second stands before me now, marked for collection." Running Wolf felt the words like a physical blow. Though he had suspected this truth since finding the note, hearing it confirmed made his remaining strength falter. "My grandfather traded my soul," he said flatly. Windspeaker, or whatever spoke through him, inclined his head, a willing sacrifice to ensure his people's survival during desperate times. The miners threatened sacred land. Government agents threatened tribal existence. He paid with what he valued most, his own soul and that of his chosen successor. Stone leaned forward. "And my grandfather's role?" "To ensure the sacred places remained untouched. To take only what was permitted from the outer canyon. To remember and honor the boundaries." The possessed medicine man turned toward Stone, a promise broken by his blood. "I didn't know," Stone protested. "I had no idea. Ignorance does not erase the debt," came the reply. "Blood calls to blood. The Guardian has awakened to collect what is owed and punish what was violated." Running Wolf gripped the obsidian knife tighter. "Is there no alternative? Must my life be forfeit for something I had no part in agreeing to?" For the first time, Windspeaker's possessed form showed something like hesitation. "The pact is made cannot be undone. But it may be renegotiated if both bloodlines are willing to offer something of equal value. What would that be? Stone asked. Before an answer could come, a sound split the night, the donkey's call so close it seemed to come from within the circle itself. Windspeaker's body convulsed, his back arching unnaturally. When he collapsed to his knees, his eyes had cleared, confusion replacing the otherworldly knowledge that had filled them moments before. "It's coming," he gasped in his normal voice. "The Guardian comes in its true form. From the darkness beyond the circle emerged the donkey, but changed. Its form seemed to waver and shift as it approached, growing larger, more upright. Its features flowed like wax in heat, reconfiguring into something that walked on two legs, but was neither human nor animal." As it stepped into the firelight, Stone stumbled backward with a cry of terror. Running Wolf stood his ground, though every instinct screamed at him to flee. The obsidian knife pulsed in his hand, warm and alive. The Guardian had revealed its true form at last. The Guardian's true form defied easy description. It stood nearly 8 feet tall, on legs bent backward like those of a deer or goat. Its torso appeared almost human, but too thin, with skin that shifted between flesh and something like rough hide. The head remained donkey-like, yet the eyes, intelligent, ancient, and terrible, were unmistakably aware in a way no animal's could be. In its hand, for it had hands, long-fingered and dexterous, it held a staff of twisted wood that seemed to writhe slightly in the firelight. The small crowd of tribal onlookers retreated, some fleeing outright. Only Sheriff Taylor held his ground outside the circle, hand on his service weapon, though his face showed he understood how useless it would be. The Guardian spoke. Its voice resonated not through the air, but seemed to vibrate directly within their minds, deep, grating, like stones grinding together. "The debt remains unpaid. The boundary crossed. Blood calls for blood." Windspeaker had regained his composure, rising shakily to his feet. "Great Guardian," he addressed the entity, "we seek understanding of the original pact, that we might honor it properly." The Guardian's massive head tilted, regarding the old medicine man. "Understanding requires truth. Truth requires sacrifice." It shifted its gaze to Running Wolf. "The marked one knows the cost." Running Wolf felt the weight of that gaze, like physical pressure. The illness within him seemed to respond to the Guardian's attention, flaring painfully through his veins. "I know my grandfather promised my soul," he managed to say, gripping the obsidian knife tightly. "But I don't understand why. What was so dire that he traded 2 generations for protection?" The Guardian was silent for a long moment. Then it struck its staff against the ground, sending a shockwave through the circle. The fire flared blue-white, and within its flames, images began to form, moving pictures from the past. They saw Red Mountain Reservation in the 1950s, conditions far worse than anything in living memory. Children with distended bellies from malnutrition. Government agents confiscating ceremonial items. Tribal members being relocated, families separated. Then came James Stone, with his mining company, offering jobs and money for access to the canyon, a lifeline the desperate tribe couldn't refuse. But as mining expanded, strange accidents began. Workers disappeared. Equipment failed catastrophically. The images shifted to show Running Wolf's grandfather performing a summoning ritual, calling forth the Guardian to negotiate. The terms were clear. The Guardian would protect the tribe's sacred places and ensure their survival, in exchange for 2 souls, the medicine man's and his future grandson's, chosen because the spiritual power ran strongest in that bloodline. James Stone agreed to respect the boundaries the Guardian established, to mine only in permitted areas, and to ensure his descendants honored the same restrictions. The pact was sealed with blood from both men dripped into the ceremonial basin. As the visions faded, the fire returned to its normal color. Running Wolf staggered under the weight of the revelation. His grandfather had acted out of desperate love for his people, facing an impossible choice between their immediate survival and the future cost of 2 souls. "Now you understand," the Guardian intoned. "The pact preserved your people when they would have been scattered and destroyed. Your grandfather's soul has already been claimed. Yours is now due." Garrett Stone had been watching the visions with growing horror. "And my grandfather? What became of his obligation?" The Guardian turned its unsettling gaze toward Stone. His blood honored the agreement until his death. The violation came after, when maps were lost, warnings forgotten, and greed overcame caution. Stone's face flushed. "I told you I didn't know about any agreement." "Yet you dreamed," the Guardian countered. "Dreams of warnings, dreams of boundaries you should not cross. Your blood remembered what your mind chose to ignore." Stone fell silent, unable to deny the accusation. Running Wolf had seen enough of the man's reactions to know the Guardian spoke truth. Stone had received warnings he had dismissed. From beyond the circle, Nima called out, "There must be another way. Some compromise that doesn't require my father's life." The Guardian's attention shifted to her, its expression impossible to read on its inhuman face. "There is always an alternative price." Its voice held something new, a note that might have been interest, if both bloodlines are willing. It gestured with its staff, and the ground at the center of the circle split open. From the fissure rose a small stone chest, ancient and covered with symbols similar to those on the ceremonial basin. "The remains of the betrayed," the Guardian announced. "Those whose blood stains both bloodlines and created the debt that came before the pact." Running Wolf approached the chest cautiously, aware of the others watching him. Using the obsidian knife, he carefully pried open the lid. Inside lay a single object, a weathered human skull, its surface stained with mineral deposits from long burial. But most disturbing was the obvious damage, a circular hole in the back, the kind made by a bullet. As Running Wolf lifted the skull from the chest, a surge of energy passed through him. Not a vision this time, but a memory that wasn't his own. Men in period clothing from the 1800s, early miners, surrounded by Apache warriors. A confrontation, a betrayal, gunfire, bodies falling on both sides. A massacre that both parties had conspired to erase from history. "This is why the canyon is sacred," Running Wolf realized aloud. "Not just for traditional reasons. It's a burial ground. A place of shame both sides wanted to forget." The Guardian nodded its massive head. "The first debt. Blood spilled without honor. Your grandfather's pact was built upon this older sin, a sin of both peoples." Stone had approached to look at the skull. "I don't understand. What does this have to do with the current situation?" "Everything," the Guardian replied. "For the blood oath was made not just to protect sacred land, but to hide the greater shame beneath it, a massacre initiated by your ancestor against miners who discovered a rich silver vein, followed by revenge killings of innocent Apache by the surviving miners." The skull in Running Wolf's hands seemed to grow heavier with each revelation. This was no longer just about his grandfather's desperate bargain, but about a cycle of violence and deception that stretched back generations. "This changes everything," he said. Quietly, silence hung heavy in the ceremonial circle as the implications of the Guardian's revelation settled over them. The skull in Running Wolf's hands seemed to demand justice long denied, its empty eye sockets accusing both bloodlines equally. "How many died in this massacre?" Stone finally asked, his voice hollow. The Guardian's staff struck the ground again. 23 miners, 17 Apache. Blood that still cries from the earth." Running Wolf carefully returned the skull to its stone chest. "Our grandfathers made their pact not just to protect the tribe, but to keep this secret buried." He looked up at Stone. "They were covering up crimes committed by both our ancestors." Stone's composure had crumbled entirely. The confident businessman was gone, replaced by a man confronting an inherited guilt he hadn't known existed. "My family built its fortune on a foundation of murder," he whispered, "as did my grandfather build his leadership," Running Wolf acknowledged. "On secrets and bargains that cost more than he had the right to pay." The Guardian watched this exchange with those unsettling, intelligent eyes. "The truth is known. Now comes judgment. It raised its staff, and from the shadows beyond the firelight emerged the donkey, a second one, identical to the first form they had seen. Then another appeared, and another, until 7 of the creatures stood at the circle's edge, surrounding them. "What is this?" Nima called from her position at the fire. Windspeaker's eyes widened in recognition. "The 7 witnesses," he breathed, "from the oldest stories." Before he could explain further, each donkey began to transform, not into the Guardian's form, but into human shapes. As the transformations completed, Running Wolf staggered back in shock. 7 people now stood before them. 6 were dressed in clothing from different historical periods, their forms slightly translucent in the firelight. But the 7th, the one directly opposite Running Wolf across the circle, was solid and all too familiar. "Grandfather," Running Wolf whispered, "the spirit of Thomas Running Wolf," exactly as he had appeared in life, nodded solemnly to his grandson. His gaze held sorrow, pride, and a terrible knowledge. Stone was staring at another of the figures, an elderly man in 1950s attire. "My grandfather," he identified shakily. The Guardian raised its staff again. "The 7 who sealed the original pact. 3 Apache leaders, 3 miners, and the one who bridges both bloodlines." "Bridges?" Running Wolf questioned, looking between the spirits. His grandfather's spirit stepped forward, producing from his pocket an aged photograph. He held it out, and though he was insubstantial, the photograph remained solid enough for Running Wolf to take. The sepia-toned image showed a family group from the late 1800s, a white settler couple with 2 young children and an Apache woman holding an infant. On the back, faded handwriting identified them. Thomas Stone with wife Caroline, sons James and William, second wife Morning Star, and daughter Sarah, 1879. "I don't understand," Stone said, looking over Running Wolf's shoulder at the photograph. But Running Wolf was beginning to see the truth. "Your ancestor Thomas Stone had 2 families," he said slowly. "One white, one Apache." The children of both lines continued, not knowing they shared blood. He looked up at Stone with new understanding. "We're distant cousins." Stone's face paled as he grasped the implication. "The Guardian bound our bloodlines because they were already connected. The first betrayal," the Guardian confirmed. "Thomas Stone abandoned his Apache wife and daughter when silver was discovered, choosing his white family and wealth over his sacred commitments. The massacre was sparked when his Apache son-in-law led warriors to confront him years later. Running Wolf's grandfather stepped closer, his spectral form shimmering. Though his lips didn't move, his voice seemed to resonate directly in Running Wolf's mind. "I didn't know the full truth when I made the pact," the spirit conveyed. "I only learned after death that our bloodlines were one. The Guardian demanded my soul and yours because our line carries both the sin and the power to heal it." As if responding to this revelation, the obsidian knife in Running Wolf's hand began to glow with a soft blue light. At the same moment, he felt something stir in his pocket, the silver medallion from the spirit box. Now warm against his leg, he withdrew the medallion, noticing for the first time details that had been obscured by tarnish. The engraved design was a family crest, half of which matched traditional Apache symbols. The other half, bearing the Stone family markings, the binding token his grandfather's spirit identified. Created when Thomas Stone married Morning Star, broken when he abandoned her. The physical embodiment of a covenant shattered. The 2 halves of the medallion had been roughly rejoined, soldered together by inexpert hands. Running Wolf held it up, and in the firelight, the seam where the pieces met was clearly visible, a jagged line like a wound that had healed badly. "This is what your pact was truly about," Running Wolf realized, looking at his grandfather's spirit. Not just protecting the tribe, but trying to mend this broken covenant. His grandfather nodded solemnly. The Guardian spoke again, its voice resonating through all present. "Now you understand the true debt. Not just 2 souls promised in desperation, but a covenant between bloodlines that must be restored. The question remains, how will you pay it?" Stone had moved to stand beside Running Wolf, their shared blood now impossible to ignore. "What does restoring the covenant require?" he asked, addressing both the Guardian and the spirits. Running Wolf's grandfather and Stone's grandfather exchanged glances, then turned identical expressions of regret toward their descendants. "The truth must be acknowledged publicly," Running Wolf's grandfather communicated. "The massacre victims must be properly honored. The divided bloodline must be reunited." Stone's grandfather spoke for the first time, his voice crackling like old radio static. "And the broken medallion must be truly mended, not by force, but by willing sacrifice from both sides." The Guardian lowered its staff, its towering form seeming to diminish slightly. "That is the alternative price. Both of you must choose: honor the original pact with Running Wolf's soul, or forge a new covenant that acknowledges the past and binds the bloodlines in truth rather than secrecy." Windspeaker, who had been silent during these revelations, finally spoke. "The choice seems clear, but the cost of this new covenant will not be small. Truth brings its own pain." Running Wolf looked down at the medallion in his hand, then at the skull in its stone chest, and finally at Stone standing beside him, a distant cousin, an adversary, and now potentially an ally. "We need time to consider," he said to the Guardian. "Time grows short," the entity replied, gesturing toward Running Wolf's weakened body. "The illness advances as the debt comes due. Decide before the moon reaches its zenith, or the original pact will be enforced." With that, the Guardian struck its staff against the ground one final time. The 7 spirit figures dissolved back into the forms of donkeys, then melted into the shadows. The Guardian itself seemed to fold inward, shrinking and transforming until only the original donkey remained. Watching them with those 2 intelligent eyes, the medallion in Running Wolf's hand had grown cold again, but the line dividing its halves seemed more pronounced than ever, a physical representation of the choice they now faced. Running Wolf's home had become a war room of sorts. Maps, documents, and photographs covered every surface as they worked against the Guardian's deadline. The moon was already climbing in the night sky, its light spilling through the windows as a constant reminder of their dwindling time. "We need to formalize this somehow," Nima said, organizing papers at the kitchen table. "A legal framework for acknowledging both the historical truth and the new agreement." Stone nodded, phone pressed to his ear as he paced. "I understand the timing is unusual, Charles, but I need those company documents amended immediately." "Yes, including the tribal heritage acknowledgement clauses." He paused, listening. "No, this isn't a negotiating tactic. Just do it." Running Wolf sat heavily in his recliner, the illness sapping his strength with each passing hour. His fingers traced the jagged seam of the reunited medallion, feeling the rough junction where the 2 halves had been soldered together decades ago. Sheriff Taylor entered from the porch, bringing the cool night air with him. "I've contacted the County Historical Society. They're pulling all records related to the original stone mining claims and unexplained disappearances from that period." Windspeaker sat silently in the corner, eyes closed in meditation. The ancient medicine man had been conserving his strength since the revelation at the ceremonial circle, occasionally murmuring guidance, but largely leaving the younger people to formulate their plan. "We've identified the massacre site based on Benjamin's information and the old survey maps," Nima reported, marking a location on the largest canyon map. "It's directly beneath where Stone Development planned its first drilling operation." "Not a coincidence," Running Wolf noted. The Guardian had been protecting not just sacred tribal land, but the unacknowledged grave of both miners and Apache warriors. Stone ended his call and approached the map. "My legal team is drafting documents to permanently protect the canyon. The land will be placed in a joint trust, with both tribal representatives and Stone family members as trustees." "That addresses the future," Running Wolf acknowledged. "But what about the past? How do we properly honor those who died?" Windspeaker opened his eyes. "I've been shown what must be done," he said, his voice stronger than it had been all evening. "The spirits require a sacred fire that burns with offerings from both bloodlines. And they require this." From within his medicine bag, the old man withdrew a small object wrapped in buckskin. Unwrapped, it revealed a hand-carved wooden flute, its surface darkened with age and handling. Intricate symbols were burned into its length, similar to those on the ceremonial basin, but older, their meaning more primal. "The ancestor flute," Windspeaker explained, "used in the most ancient ceremonies to call to those who have passed beyond. It has not been played in 4 generations. Running Wolf recognized the instrument from tribal stories, but had never seen it before. "I thought it was lost, hidden," Windspeaker corrected, "until needed again. Your grandfather entrusted it to me before he died, knowing this day would come." Stone approached cautiously, studying the flute with fascination. "It's beautiful," he acknowledged, "but how does a flute help us resolve a blood debt?" "Music speaks what words cannot," Windspeaker replied. "It carries intentions beyond the veil that separates worlds. The right melody, played with true purpose, can mend what was broken in ways physical actions cannot." Running Wolf remembered stories of his ancestors using music in healing ceremonies, but this was different, a ritual object with power beyond mere symbolism. "Who plays it?" he asked. Windspeaker looked between Running Wolf and Stone. One from each bloodline must breathe into it together. A shared offering of breath and intention. Stone looked skeptical but nodded. If that's what it takes, Nima had been studying her father with growing concern. "We need to move quickly," she urged. "The illness is accelerating, indeed." Running Wolf could feel the disease, spreading through his body with unnatural speed. The Guardian's way of ensuring the original pact would be fulfilled. If they failed to establish a new covenant by moonrise, "We need one more element," Windspeaker said. "Something that connects past and present, something that bears witness to both the old crime and the new commitment." Running Wolf thought of the objects they had gathered. The medallion, the knife, the skull. None seemed quite right for what Windspeaker described. Sheriff Taylor cleared his throat. "I might have something." From his jacket pocket, he withdrew a small leather pouch. "Found this in the county evidence lockup when I was searching for historical records. It was labeled Stone Canyon Incident 1956 and never properly logged." He emptied the pouch onto the table. Out tumbled a tarnished silver pocket watch, its case dented and scratched. When opened, the watch still ticked, though the glass covering the face was cracked. Inside the case was an inscription: "To Thomas Stone, may you always find your way home, 1870. The original Thomas Stone, Running Wolf identified. "The one who abandoned his Apache family." Stone picked up the watch carefully. "My family's origin point. Both the success and the sin. And the perfect witness," Windspeaker confirmed. "It was present at the first betrayal, passed down through generations, and now returns at the moment of reconciliation." Running Wolf checked the time on the watch, then glanced outside at the rising moon. "We have less than 2 hours. We need to return to the canyon." As they gathered their materials, Running Wolf felt a sharp pain lance through his chest. He staggered, catching himself against the wall. Nima was at his side instantly. "Father?" He waved away her concern, though the effort cost him. "I'm fine. We need to focus on the ceremony." Stone was watching him, understanding dawning in his eyes. "The original pact is still in effect," he realized. "Until we complete the new covenant, your life is still forfeit." Running Wolf straightened with effort. "All the more reason to succeed." Outside, the donkey waited silently in the street, its eyes reflecting the moonlight. As they emerged from the house, it turned and began walking slowly toward the canyon, clearly expecting them to follow. The ancestor flute in wind, Speaker's hands, seemed to vibrate softly of its own accord, as if awakening after its long dormancy. The path to reconciliation lay before them, but whether they could walk it in time remained to be seen. The procession to the canyon moved with quiet urgency through the moonlit night. The donkey led the way, its pace deliberate but steady. Running Wolf followed with Windspeaker and Nima close beside him, ready to offer support when his strength faltered. Stone walked a few paces behind, carrying documents in a leather portfolio. Sheriff Taylor brought up the rear, occasionally glancing back to ensure no curious onlookers followed. As they neared the canyon rim, the air grew heavy with an electric tension. The night sounds, insects, distant coyotes, the rustle of desert wind, fell away into profound silence. Even their footsteps seemed muted, as if the earth itself held its breath in anticipation. "We're being watched," Nima whispered, scanning the shadows. Running Wolf nodded. He could feel the presence of the unseen observers, the spirits of those who had died in the forgotten massacre, drawn by the approaching ceremony. Their attention felt like a physical weight, pressing in from all sides. The donkey halted at the canyon's edge, where the ceremonial circle from earlier remained intact. The creature turned its intelligent gaze toward Running Wolf, then stepped aside, revealing what hadn't been there before: a narrow path leading down into the canyon, illuminated by a soft blue phosphorescence that seemed to emanate from the rocks themselves. "The Guardian is granting us access to the sacred ground," Windspeaker explained. "A sign that our intentions are being acknowledged." The descent was treacherous, particularly for Running Wolf in his weakened state. Each step sent spikes of pain through his body as the illness continued its accelerated progression. Twice he nearly fell, saved only by Nima's quick reflexes. "We should have brought a stretcher," she muttered, helping him navigate a particularly steep section. "No time," he replied through gritted teeth. "I'll make it." Stone had moved ahead with surprising agility, as if drawn forward by some unseen force. "There's something down here," he called back. "Some kind of structure." As they rounded a bend in the glowing path, they saw what Stone had discovered: a circular stone platform built into the canyon floor. Ancient and weathered, its surface was carved with intricate designs that matched those on the ceremonial basin and the Guardian's staff. At its center stood a stone pedestal with a shallow depression at the top, the Covenant Stone, Windspeaker identified with reverence. "I've heard of it in the oldest stories, but never thought to see it with living eyes." The donkey had reached the platform ahead of them somehow, despite having been behind them moments before. As they approached, it began to transform once again, not into the Guardian's imposing form, but into something new. The creature's body elongated and thinned, its hide flowing like water until it took the shape of a robed human figure, featureless and silver-white, like living moonlight given form. In its hand it still carried the twisted staff, the Arbiter, Windspeaker whispered. The Guardian's true aspect when judging covenants. The moonlight figure gestured toward the platform, clearly indicating they should step onto it. As they did, small blue flames ignited around the circle's edge, casting everything in an otherworldly glow. The Arbiter's voice resonated in their minds as the Guardians had before. "The hour approaches. The Covenant must be sealed before the moon reaches its zenith." Running Wolf looked up at the night sky. The moon was climbing steadily, perhaps 30 minutes from its highest point. His body felt as if it were burning from within, the illness consuming him at an unnatural rate. "We've brought what is needed," he said, fighting to keep his voice steady. Windspeaker stepped forward, laying out the items they had gathered: the ancestor flute, the obsidian knife, the broken medallion, the pocket watch, and the skull from the stone chest. Each object seemed to absorb the blue light, the glow with its own inner luminescence. "Something is missing," the Arbiter observed, its featureless face somehow conveying disappointment. Stone frowned, checking the items against their planned ceremony. "We have everything Windspeaker said was required. What more do we need?" The Arbiter raised its staff, pointing to the stone pedestal at the center. "The key must be placed upon the altar. Without it, no new covenant can be formed." "What key?" Running Wolf asked, exchanging confused glances with Windspeaker. The old medicine man shook his head, equally perplexed. "I know of no key in the ancient stories." As they stood in uncertainty, Nima had been scanning the platform's carved designs. "Father, look at this," she called, kneeling to examine one section. Running Wolf joined her, seeing what had caught her attention, a carving that depicted two figures holding what appeared to be a circular object between them. The carving was worn with age, but still distinct enough to recognize the object's importance. "It looks like," he began, then stopped, a memory surfacing. Reaching into his pocket, he withdrew the silver bell he had found outside the clinic, the mining artifact that had seemed to call to him. Looking at it now in the blue light, he noticed something he hadn't seen before, a small keyhole on its side, nearly invisible beneath the tarnish. This was never just a bell, he realized. "Let me see that," Stone said, stepping closer. He reached into his shirt and pulled out a chain that hung around his neck. On it was a small silver key, worn smooth with handling. "My grandfather gave this to my father, who gave it to me. Bembley tradition says it opens the way home. Whatever that means." With trembling hands, Running Wolf held out the bell while Stone inserted the key. It fit perfectly. When turned, instead of unlocking anything, the key mechanism caused the bell to transform, its sides unfolding like a flower to reveal a small compartment inside. Nestled within was a single object, a braided circle made from three distinct materials: horsehair from European stock, Apache human hair, and threads of silver. The circle was no larger than a wedding band, but the craftsmanship was exquisite, the three strands perfectly intertwined. The binding circle, the Arbiter identified. Created when Thomas Stone married Morning Star, representing the three elements of their union: his world, her world, and the mineral that both coveted. It was hidden when the bloodlines were divided, waiting to be reunited. Running Wolf carefully lifted the binding circle from its container. Despite its age, the Running Wolf held the binding circle in his palm, feeling its surprising weight. Despite being made of seemingly fragile materials, it had an undeniable solidity, as if the three interwoven strands had somehow transformed into something stronger than their individual components. "Place it upon the altar," the Arbiter instructed, gesturing toward the stone pedestal. As Running Wolf moved to comply, a violent coughing fit struck him. He doubled over, dark blood speckling his hand as he covered his mouth. The illness was entering its final stage, the Guardian enforcing the original pact as the deadline approached. Nima rushed to support him, medical training overriding ceremonial caution. "Father, you need to rest. No time," he gasped, straightening with effort. The binding circle remained clutched in his bloodied palm, the red drops seeping into the woven strands. Rather than staining the artifact, the blood seemed to be absorbed, causing the silver threads to gleam more brightly in the moonlight. Stone watched with growing alarm. "How do we proceed? What's required to form the new covenant?" The Arbiter's featureless face turned toward the sky, where the moon approached its zenith. "The old pact was sealed with blood and death. The new covenant requires life and truth. The separated bloodlines must be rejoined by choice, not force. The hidden history must be acknowledged and honored." Windspeaker removed the leather wrapping from the ancestor flute. "First, we must call to the spirits who wait for justice," he said, offering the instrument to Running Wolf. "You must play the Song of Remembrance." Running Wolf hesitated. "I don't know the melody." "Your blood remembers," Windspeaker assured him. "As does his." He nodded toward Stone. Understanding what was required, Running Wolf motioned Stone closer. "We must play it together. Your breath and mine, joined in the same instrument." Stone's skepticism had faded in the face of Running Wolf's deteriorating condition and the undeniable power of the Arbiter's presence. He nodded, positioning himself opposite Running Wolf with the flute between them. "Follow my lead," Running Wolf instructed, bringing the mouthpiece to his lips while Stone placed his hands on the flute's body, fingers over the tone holes, as if guided by some ancestral memory. The first note wavered uncertainly, but as Running Wolf continued to breathe into the instrument, with Stone modulating the tone through finger positions neither of them consciously knew, a haunting melody emerged, ancient and new simultaneously, complex patterns weaving together like the strands of the binding circle. As the music filled the canyon, The blue flames around the platform flared higher. The air shimmered, and translucent figures began to materialize around them, the spirits of those who had died in the massacre generations ago. Miners in period clothing from the 1800s, Apache warriors with solemn faces, women and children from both groups who had been caught in the violence. The skull on the altar began to glow with an inner light, its empty eye sockets seeming to watch the proceedings with ancient awareness. Windspeaker raised his arms. Ancestors of both bloodlines, hear us. We acknowledge the wrongs done to you. We honor your memory and your sacrifice. The spirits drew closer, their spectral forms more defined now. Among them, Running Wolf recognized his grandfather, watching with a mixture of sorrow and hope. Beside him stood James Stone, the two former adversaries now united in death. As the song from the flute reached its crescendo, the Arbiter raised its staff. The truth must be spoken aloud. Both bloodlines must acknowledge their part in the original sin. Stone lowered his hands from the flute, the melody fading but still echoing through the canyon. I, Garrett Stone, acknowledge that my ancestor Thomas Stone abandoned his Apache wife and child, breaking sacred vows. I acknowledge that Stone men later participated in the massacre of innocent Apache people to hide their shame and protect their mining claims. His voice grew stronger as he continued. I recognize that my family's wealth was built upon this betrayal and violence. I commit to restoring what was broken and honoring those who were wronged. Running Wolf struggled to stand upright as he too spoke. I, Thomas Running Wolf, named for the first Thomas of our joined bloodlines, acknowledge that my ancestors participated in the massacre of innocent miners in revenge. I acknowledge that my grandfather made a pact that sacrificed my life without my consent, continuing the cycle of bloodshed. His legs nearly gave out, but he forced himself to remain standing. I commit to healing the division between our bloodlines and honoring all those who died unremembered. The Arbiter nodded in approval, then gestured to the items arranged around the pedestal. Now the covenant must be sealed with the offered artifacts. Each represents an element of the pact. Running Wolf placed the binding circle in the depression atop the pedestal. Immediately it began to glow with golden light, casting new shadows across the platform. The obsidian knife, the Arbiter directed. Stone picked up the ancient blade, its edge gleaming in the supernatural light. What do I do with this? The old covenant required the sacrifice of a soul, the Arbiter explained. The new covenant requires a different sacrifice, of pride, of false history, of separate identities. Understanding dawned in Stone's eyes. He approached the medallion that still lay on the altar, the broken halves roughly soldered together generations ago. With careful precision, he used the knife to cut through the tarnished solder, separating the two halves once more. Divided to be properly rejoined, he said. Handing one half to Running Wolf, the Arbiter nodded. Now the pocket watch. Time must witness the healing of what it saw broken. Nima retrieved the watch, opening its case. Despite the cracked crystal, the hands continued to move, ticking steadily toward midnight. Place it beneath the binding circle, the Arbiter instructed. She did so, sliding the timepiece into a previously unnoticed slot beneath the pedestal. As it clicked into place, the platform beneath their feet began to vibrate subtly. The final element remains, the Arbiter announced. The joining of what was separated, through willing sacrifice of blood freely given, not taken. Running Wolf and Stone exchanged glances, understanding what was required. The knife passed between them, its obsidian edge catching the blue light. Not just symbolic this time, Running Wolf said. A true joining of bloodlines. As the moon reached its zenith, they each drew the blade across their palms, then pressed the medallion halves between their bleeding hands, Stone's right to Running Wolf's left, recreating the handshake their grandfathers had once shared to seal the original pact. The Arbiter raised its staff high. Let what was broken be mended. Let what was hidden be known. Let what was divided be rejoined. As their blood mingled over the separated halves of the medallion, a blinding light erupted from the binding circle. Light erupted from the binding circle. enveloping Running Wolf and Stone in a golden radiance that forced the others to shield their eyes. Within this cocoon of light, something extraordinary happened. The medallion halves between their bleeding palms grew warm, then hot, as if being forged anew. When the light subsided seconds later, they opened their hands to reveal not the broken pieces they had held, but a single unified medallion, the seam between halves now invisible, the metal gleaming as if freshly minted. The family crest, half Apache symbols, half stone markings, stood out in perfect relief. "The physical manifestation of your covenant," the Arbiter announced. "As the medallion is made whole, so too are the bloodlines." Running Wolf stared in amazement, not just at the transformed medallion, but at his own hand. The cut from the obsidian knife had healed completely, leaving only a faint silver line across his palm. More remarkably, he could feel the illness that had been consuming him rapidly retreating, like poison being drawn from a wound. Stone examined his own hand, finding an identical silver mark. "It worked," he breathed, looking up at Running Wolf with new understanding in his eyes. "You're healing." The spirits surrounding the platform had drawn closer during the transformation, their translucent forms more defined now. Running Wolf's grandfather stepped forward, his expression solemn but relieved, as if a great burden had finally been lifted. Beside him, James Stone's spirit nodded in acknowledgement. The Arbiter raised its staff once more. "The covenant is formed, but not yet complete. The dead must be honored. The living must remember." Windspeaker approached, carrying a small clay pot decorated with geometric designs, a traditional Apache vessel used in burial ceremonies. "I prepared this after our first encounter with the Guardian," he explained. "Sacred earth from the 4 directions, mixed with purifying herbs." He handed the pot to Running Wolf. "This must be buried at the massacre site, with proper prayers and acknowledgement." Running Wolf accepted the vessel, feeling its ceremonial weight. "We'll need to mark the site properly," he said. "A memorial that honors all who died." "Agreed," Stone said immediately. "My company will fund whatever is appropriate, with the tribe determining the design." He glanced at the Arbiter. "Is that acceptable?" The featureless face gave nothing away, but the staff inclined slightly in what seemed to be approval. "There is one final element required," the Arbiter announced. From within its robes, it produced a small leather pouch that hadn't been there moments before. "The Earth has kept this hidden until it was needed." The Arbiter opened the pouch, emptying its contents into its palm. A simple braided cord necklace with a pendant made from a single piece of turquoise set in silver. The design matched elements from both the Apache symbols and the Stone family crest. "Morning Star's pendant," Windspeaker identified with awe. "Given to her by Thomas Stone as a wedding gift. It was said to be buried with her, until now," the Arbiter confirmed. "It must be returned to the Earth at the massacre site." Completing the circle of acknowledgement, Running Wolf carefully took the ancient pendant, feeling its connection to the woman whose abandoned marriage had set these events in motion generations ago. He placed it gently in the clay pot with the sacred earth. As he did so, something unexpected happened. The spirits of the massacre victims began to approach the platform one by one. Each paused before Running Wolf and Stone, some nodding in solemn acknowledgement, others placing spectral hands briefly on their shoulders before moving on. Last came Running Wolf's grandfather and James Stone, standing side by side. Though no words were spoken aloud, their message was clear in the expressions on their transparent faces: gratitude, relief, and finally peace. The spirits began to fade, their forms becoming less distinct as they drifted toward the canyon walls and disappeared. The Arbiter watched them go, then turned its attention back to the living. "The dead have accepted your covenant," it announced. "Now you must live by it." The binding circle on the altar began to pulse with light, matching the rhythm of their heartbeats. As they watched, it rose from the pedestal and hovered in the air before them, spinning slowly. "The physical embodiment of your agreement," the Arbiter explained. "It must be kept safe for as long as it remains intact." So too will the covenant between your bloodlines. The circle floated toward them, then split into twin rings of light that encircled their wrists like bracelets before fading into their skin, leaving matching circular markings where the light had touched, visible proof of their bond. The arbiter's form began to shift and flow, contracting back toward the shape of the donkey. "My task is complete," it said, its mental voice growing fainter. The guardian returns to its slumber until needed again. As the transformation completed, the donkey regarded them with those two intelligent eyes one last time before turning and walking away into the shadows of the canyon. Windspeaker sighed deeply. "It is done," he said. "The blood debt is paid." Running Wolf felt strength returning to his body with each passing moment. The medallion in his hand pulsed with warmth, as if alive with the energy of the newly formed covenant. "Not paid," he corrected. "Transformed. This isn't an ending, but a beginning." Stone nodded, understanding. "The real work starts now, honoring the dead, acknowledging the truth, and rebuilding what was broken." Nima, who had watched the ceremony with silent wonder, finally spoke. "Dawn is coming," she observed, pointing to the faint lightening of the eastern sky. "The first day of the new covenant." As if responding to her words, the blue flames around the platform began to diminish, returning to ordinary fire before extinguishing completely. The unnatural silence that had enveloped the canyon lifted, allowing the natural sounds of the desert to return, the call of an early bird, the rustle of wind through the rocks. Running Wolf looked down at the unified medallion, then at the clay pot containing Morningstar's pendant and the sacred earth. In that moment, he felt the weight of both the past and the future, the responsibility to honor what had happened here and to ensure the new covenant remained unbroken. With renewed strength, he started toward the path leading out of the canyon, the others falling in step beside him. The first light of dawn painted the canyon walls ahead, turning the red rocks to gold, a new day for bloodlines once divided, now rejoined by choice rather than force. Behind them, unnoticed, a single set of hoofprints in the sand slowly faded away, as if the creature that made them had never existed at all. 1 month later, Running Wolf stood at the edge of the sacred canyon, watching as workers carefully positioned the last stone of the memorial. The structure was simple but powerful, a circular arrangement of standing stones, half in the Apache style and half reflecting Western masonry techniques. At its center stood a bronze plaque listing the names of all who had died in the massacre, both miners and Apache. "It's perfect," Nima said, joining him at the overlook. "Honoring everyone equally." Running Wolf nodded, feeling a deep satisfaction. The memorial was just the most visible part of the changes that had swept through the reservation since that night in the canyon. The illness that had been consuming him was gone completely, leaving him healthier than he'd felt in years. The silver line across his palm, matched by an identical mark on Garrett Stone's hand, was the only physical reminder of what they had endured. "The governor's car just arrived," Sheriff Taylor announced, approaching from the parking area where a small crowd had gathered. "Looks like the State Historical Commission came too. Today marked the official dedication of both the memorial and the newly established Sacred Canyon Trust, a joint venture between the tribe and Stone Development that would protect the canyon while funding education and infrastructure, projects on the reservation. The BLM agents who had threatened tribal land rights just weeks ago now stood awkwardly to one side, their agency having formally recognized the tribe's historical claim after the discovery of documents that Stone's legal team had unexpectedly found in company. Archives, Garrett Stone himself stood near the memorial, conversing with tribal elders he would have dismissed as irrelevant just a month earlier. The transformation in the man was nearly as remarkable as the physical. Healing Running Wolf had experienced, from ruthless developer to passionate advocate. For the Joint Heritage Project, Windspeaker approached slowly, his ancient body requiring the support of a hand-carved walking stick that hadn't been necessary before the ceremony. The night in the canyon had taken a toll on the old medicine man, as if he had transferred some of his remaining life energy to Running Wolf during the healing. "It is good," the elder pronounced, surveying the memorial. "The ancestors are pleased." From his shirt pocket, he withdrew a small object wrapped in white cloth. "Before the ceremony begins, there is something you should have." Running Wolf accepted the bundle, carefully unwrapping it to reveal a beautifully crafted silver ring. The band was engraved with a continuous pattern that blended traditional Apache designs with symbols from the Stone family crest. At its center sat a small turquoise stone, identical in color to Morning Star's pendant they had buried at the massacre site.